Let's get started. Welcome everybody to the March 3rd SIG Multicluster call. And today we have a couple of items that have been highlighted for scrubbing and then a few topics. Laura, do you want to start with the first one?
Yes, I do.
Oh, there's the some AI meeting notes thing. Do we need to?
Yeah, I've declined it. I'll kick it on. Kick it out. Let's see.
Okay, we good?
Yeah.
All right. And I'm sharing the correct screen. Okay, so I want to talk about this issue about the cluster manager implementation. I'm going to give some background first so that we all know what we're talking about. This is actually, let me back up even more. Okay, the cluster profile API, also known as the cluster inventory API, is an API to store information about multiple clusters in a cluster set. One of the effects of that is to be able to like roll up some metadata about all of them, and another effect and goal of that is to be able to give something that has access to the cluster inventory credentials to the member clusters so that like some multi-cluster thing could potentially happen across the entire fleet. So this is split into two KEPs right now, this one 4322 cluster inventory and this one 5339 plugin for credentials, where the first one describes the API in general and the second one describes the actual plugin mechanism for credentials to actually be stored per cluster profile CR in the CRD. In the cluster inventory KEP, there's a reference to something called a cluster manager. And this is important terminology to understand the discussion question, which is an entity that creates the cluster profile API object per member cluster and keeps their status up to date. And it also says each cluster profile resource should be managed by only one cluster manager. Okay, so going over to this second KEP about the plugin for credentials, this KEP introduced a couple things, but most importantly, this access providers struct in the status of a cluster profile CR. And to also try and make this more clear, here is the API from Cluster Inventory API. Here's the cluster profile status. It has conditions. It has conditions, version, properties. These are those metadata properties I mentioned before. It could be like pulled up for each individual cluster CR. That could be any arbitrary metadata about that cluster. Credential providers and access providers. Sorry. So these are the things that are in the status. This access providers is the means by which, the credential means by which one could access this cluster profile CR, the cluster that's represented by this cluster profile CR. Okay, so this issue is asking what is up with cluster manager implementation. So back to the beginning when I said, sorry, that's over here, that there's a thing defined here called cluster manager, an entity. There's a need to establish clear guidelines for cluster manager implementation because there's conflicting approaches being discussed. So this is about how do all these different status fields, properties, access providers, version, conditions, these ones that we talked about here, who is responsible for updating them for a given CR, and how does that jive with the things that are written in these two KEPs? So there's been some comments in some recent PRs, which is why this came up, about potentially having separate plugin controllers for each access provider, or the idea that there's a single controller that manages the entire status for a given cluster profile CR. It's not per access provider. So this is like, is all of this done by one person, or not person, but entity, or are all the different, this is a list here, so are all the different access providers in here managed by separate controllers that are each themselves related to the individual access provider? And there's some concerns here about if we're allowing multiple entities to update the same status fields, then there's like some issues written here. So there's some patterns suggested here as well. There may be more that people might have ideas about, but there's some that are here from OP about monolithic controllers, specialized controllers, a hybrid approach that kind of delegates some information to some responsibility to something called a plugin that we might treat differently, shared field management entirely, and then some even like more general or higher level questions like, is the cluster manager expected to be XXX? Again, over here, it just says it's an entity. It doesn't even really say that it's a controller or a set of controllers or anything necessarily, which may have been by definition or by design rather. Over in this, there's one other thing here regarding this. The second KEP does mention that access providers should not contain any controller-specific information and is usable by different controller applications or consumers without requiring changes, which isn't super clear what that means about the guidelines for what can actually write here compared to the other things in the status. And then everything else kind of falls out of some of those questions, including how we want to document this and how prescriptive we want to be explaining it to people. So hopefully that helped explain what's going on and give people some context on this issue. And we can talk about it online or we can talk about it now. But I think basically the most important thing is there's a big gap between the word and entity, and the statement, each cluster profile resource should be managed by only one cluster manager, and all of the stuff in here about this access provider specifically being accessible and usable by different controllers, applications, or consumers. And then the practical question of how this even gets updated. Hey, Mike.
Yes, so thank you, Laura, for that explanation. I have a clear picture of what the question is, because I was a little bit information overwhelmed by
Yeah, totally.
So thank you for breaking that down. So from my naive point of view, because I understand my usage. Well,
Yeah.
actually, Laura, I think if you know who Marcus is, he is writing a PR about integrating Argo CD with cluster profile.
Gotcha.
So are you aware of his work? I think he's in the GKE team, maybe.
Not really,
Not really.
but
Okay.
I will be
Yep.
if it's
No.
relevant to this question.
Yeah, because in that particular example, I thought you have additional context. That's right, but it's okay. In that particular example, right? It's always the producer, which is surrounding cluster inventory API, cluster profile placement decision. We always have the producer and the consumer concepts, and the producer is basically the cluster manager. And in the cap, like you said, we mentioned it's an entity, but it was always assumed that it's going to be one of those multi-cluster provider like OCM, like Fleet, etc.
Right. Yeah.
And those are the ones that generates that owns cluster profiles, and and generates and create cluster profile. And they're not meant to. You're not meant to have multiple of those cluster manager writing on the same cluster profile.
Right.
And it's nice that we design a namespace scope, because if you really need to have different cluster manager on the same cluster, or whatever, you're just having different namespace scope, right? And then now going to the access provider side. So whoever owns the cluster profile writes the entirety of the whole object, including the status, including the access providers. And then the on the access provider cap, or I guess we call it credential back then,
Right.
that is mentioning about the consumers. So different consumers like Argo CD read, yeah, can read this status field and use the information, but they're not meant to make changes to this object. So they're the consumers only. So to me, it's like, maybe I'm looking from a naive point of view.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's quite not quite clear, but at least okay clear, where there's the producer and the consumer pattern that we always discuss. So I'm for view one, I guess, or yeah, like the
This.
maybe the pattern, yeah, because that's all we like. We always talk about monolithic controller in that namespace, but the consumer can be multiple if needed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, that's interesting. Um, is there a world where, like, since access providers is like a list, right? Like, is there a world where there's multiple access providers that one cluster manager would not be like capable of filling out, I guess, of annotating?
Yeah, I think I think there is. I mean, we made it in the list as a safety, but
Mm-hmm.
in real world scenarios, I feel like this particular namespace is Argo CD, and Argo CD uses the cluster profile within Argo CD, and the access provider may be only for Argo CD. So I guess, yeah. And then if
Okay.
it's another namespace for Q, I don't know actually. Now that I think about it, wait, because you might need access. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's
Yeah.
the other part of this,
Right. Right.
um, too. Like, even still on the provider side, fully on the provider side.
Yeah.
Yeah, because here, this question is cluster manager expected to be a single controller that creates both cluster profile resources and updates their status? I think you expect it to.
Yeah.
Separate controllers, one for creation, another for status updates. I think you might not care if they're separate controllers as long as they're by the same cluster manager,
Yep.
whoever
Exactly.
that is, right? Okay. A flexible pattern where either approach is acceptable. I also think that maybe you don't care. But uh, I don't think any of these are necessarily asking whether, oh, actually, here, this one. Access provider specifically. For status access providers, should this be populated by the same controller that manages other status fields? I think you're starting by saying yes, and then we're in a little bit of a squishy
Yeah.
spot of if there's a list of access providers that are not all of interest to what we're calling the cluster manager. Should credential plugins be separate controllers? How does this interact with the plugin mechanism? So this is kind of some detail stuff about what that means and how to clean up CAP 5339 to represent it.
Okay. I
Um,
think I have enough to work with async.
okay, cool. And
I
one
don't
other
want
thing
to.
is that I've been harping a lot on the access providers because that's the
Yeah.
thought I got stuck on. But this question also is applying to, from the perspective of OP, status properties, can anything else be responsible for updating this besides the cluster manager, and also just everything else that's in the status version and conditions. So I think we can, I don't know, start wherever we want, but that is one of the questions, and so is access providers. I think these kind of operate a little differently. So there might be two different answers here or not. I don't know, but yeah, just flagging that.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, thanks. So yeah, thanks everybody for listening. And if you have some thoughts on this, please post it to this issue. And that's all I wanted to say on this.
All right, thanks. Arthur, your turn.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just about like a reminder about the V1 beta 1 now that we are in the clear and should actually be bumping it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I know that the line number is frightening, but most of it is generated file, and I tried my best to separate in many commits the different set and generated file that I'm doing there. So
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah,
stop at the line
Laura and I
number
took a look at this, and we thought we just need to take a look at it and check that everything's actually as expected and all the stuff that's been copied. But we'll add a comment once we get around to that, and then yeah, it should be fairly easy to review after that. Thanks. And I'm on a related note, I'm going to release 040 of the API probably tomorrow morning European time before the beta merge, so that we have a sort of last Alpha 1 only release, because of course Alpha 1 will still be available in the MCS API afterwards. And so that's in particular so that people can use IP families and so on without having to import the project. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. To be honest, I'm not using the tag, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just the latest commit. But yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, Mike, you've got something about the KubeCon Japan maintainer track.
Yes. This comes from the discussion I have with one of the more frequent contributor lately, the Kahiro. He's from Japan, and he's eager to represent the SIG MC in KubeCon Japan, in the upcoming KubeCon Japan, in the maintenance track. So, but he doesn't. He mentioned that okay, the maintenance track in that submission requires a few things, like the submitter must be listed on like maintainers.cncfio, or it needs to be a Kubernetes subproject lead, such as your Steven or Jeremy. So, and I kind of remember in KubeCon Japan, I think one time was a Qjang and Ryan were able to kind of proxy as Germany's or Steven as proxy and attend the KubeCon China to present on behalf of in KubeCon China. So I'm wondering, is there opportunity here as well? Is Jeremy or Stefan, are you both looking to attend KubeCon Japan? And then is there opportunity for him to kind of represent?
Yeah, we don't need to attend. We just need to submit.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, the idea is just making sure that like the person signing up as to present the maintainer track is a maintainer. But yeah, I think more representation is great.
Okay. So I'll talk to him, because I don't know if he's able to attend the APAC time or not. So
he's
oh, he is? Okay.
Yeah, he's been there a couple of times.
Okay, so I'll inform him then, because I think from my outside, maybe from Red Hat side, maybe QJam wants to attend the KubeCon Japan as well, and maybe under the SIG-MC umbrella. So I'll reach out to both of them and see. That's all I have. I got what I want. Thank you, Stephen and Jeremy. That's it for me.
Right. Thanks. Arthur, the next one's yours again. Do you want to share
Yeah.
your screen?
Yeah, I
I'll
think
stop sharing mine.
so. Okay, so this is about the MCS cluster selection thing. I'm trying to present meanwhile. Okay, so just to say a few words about that before starting. Like basically in MCS API, you don't have a way to currently like prefer certain cluster or more in general have way to customize load balancing to whatever is in your cluster set. And this proposal is about that. And we discussed already a couple of times, but I wanted to come back on the cell approach because I dig into that rabbit hole and it's really a rabbit hole. So basically, there is a cell
Can you make it
complexity cost.
sorry, can you make the
Sorry.
font a little bit bigger?
Yeah.
So sorry,
I
like
think so.
the zoom. Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay. So there is something called a cell expression cost. And if you are not aware, it's about a similar concept as eBPF or things like that. Basically, when it compiles your cell expressions, it tries to estimate the worst complexity it can get. So if you iterate over some things, it check what is the max length of that things. The same for like, yeah, well, I mean, in general, there is two problems with that. The number of clusters, because if you iterate with many clusters, it will add toward that complexity. And also the property values, because we don't have anything that restrict the property values in any way. So those two things are kind of problematic. If we are going with like a kind of a list approach, so list approach means you pass every cluster into one cell expressions. And yeah, in there you can like have a really high complexity, and there is like kind of a trick to, for instance, limit the number of cluster you pass. And the number of cluster could be only the exported one, so it doesn't have to be every cluster in your cluster set, so only those participating in the like exporting the service. And yeah, there is some kind of nice use case though for passing all the clusters, because you can have any kind of cross-cluster logic basically. The alternative is to only pass one cluster at a time, and it restricts very much what you could do, because you can just have compare like the current cluster you are in and the candidate. So you cannot do like loop every cluster, compute something, and then select some cluster and things like that. So yeah, there's this. And yeah, I listed some nice use case for the list approach here. For instance, you could, I don't know, pick only 3 clusters of your cluster list, which you cannot do here because you cannot retain the info that you already have to. You can have some, I don't know, some complex anti-affinity rules. Like you want, you have 10 cluster in one region, but you want exactly 3. You could do that with that. You could even like fails if like return no cluster if there is no if you don't have 3 at the minimum in that region or something, and then go into the next selector, compute something around every cluster. I don't know. You have some kind of integer inside one property. You compute the median, the average, and you pick every cluster above that, or 3 cluster above that, something like that. So cell sounds awesome, but I kind of would like to differ it a little bit, because this sounds like a very important choice. And I don't know if I'm like competent. Well, I mean, dig kind of deep into that hole, but I would prefer that someone that already introduced sales somewhere, like, kind of take a look. And I don't know if we have that kind of expertise in this group, basically. So yeah, that was. I talk for a long time.
Yeah.
And talk about complex things, so don't hesitate to.
Yeah,
ask
I
questions
see
on-
how 256 is not enough. I do think we could potentially go talk to SIG API machinery about this, because I think that's where cell hype is coming from,
Oh, cool.
and get some more insight, and I'm happy to help with that too. Can we also maybe like, can you what is it, not reframe, like reestablish to me like what the goal of the traffic cluster selection traffic distribution is? Like, do we feel that these complex cases are like really important? I mean, I know that maybe it wasn't in your purview in the first place, since you weren't considering cell in the first place, but in like seeing like what this could potentially do we feel like this is an important addition to what like users are going to expect or want for cluster selection and traffic distribution?
So, well, outside of those cross-cluster use case, there is one kind of interesting one, which is that, like, here you can just check for an exact match over some things. And here you could say, if this string is in that properties, or apply that regex over that properties.
Right.
If it works, you go ahead. And then there is all of those things.
Okay. And also, can you remind me, last time we were talking, wasn't there a world where like both of these were possible at some point? Like that the API would allow for, yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Like, basically you could merge both things. Like, there is an expression field here, and you could have this essentially.
And if that happened, do you think it would be like, this is getting complicated, but would like the property selector part be like a filter that goes into the expression? Or are you thinking that like you don't do that type of merge, you just like prefer the more specific like cell expression over the property selector?
So to me, this shouldn't be allowed, but like this should be allowed. Like, you could have, well, you could have one at a time in each item, to me.
And
Like,
how
basically, it's an
do
easy
they
addition.
interact with each other if you have one of each?
So
Well,
the
each are
additive, right?
independent.
Yeah, each item would select clusters.
Yeah. So
Okay.
so basically, if this selects nothing, no endpoint, it goes to the next one. So each are
I
like
see.
very independent. and
We're going in order.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess we can choose whatever we want, but I see the vision. And that would definitely reduce the cost. And I think, how to say, like respects the individual strengths of the two different ways to express what you want.
Yeah, there's even that way. Like, you could
Right.
have.
Right.
I
Okay.
don't know.
Well, yeah. If we can, I think we should discuss a little bit how that like, how the priority or ordering, like how the user can specify that. But I do think there has been appetite here thus far of people who have talked about to support multiple ways to define this expression. So we would need to, sorry, like expression or property selector or placement selector.
Yeah.
Placement decision selector. So if that's the case, then I think no matter what in the future, we're going to have to negotiate what the priority system is, and I think we could continue with one, and then I do think in the background we should go talk to API Machinery about the cell cost issue and what if we're on the right track regarding that. That's my opinion.
Yeah, which option? Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even like, yeah, the placement decision or something else. Yeah. By the way, like the placement decision or well, the external thing is kind of important to that the cell discussion because I mean we could say that we don't like the list approach and say if you want more complex stuff, go here. Basically.
Right, fair.
But well, I mean there are decisions to be made and
sure.
I didn't know about SIG machinery and sounds great. I don't know how to contact them, but let's see.
They've got a Slack channel and their regular calls.
Yeah, I think let's ping something in the Slack channel on to like linking this doc, I think, and the specific like even that paragraph at the top where you talked about the cost and the effect, like how this with these first two sentences, and be like, we want to check that we've got this right. Who do we talk to?
Maybe I should just hop into their call. I don't know.
Yeah, we can also hop into their call. I think they have an open agenda. I don't think I've personally been to API Machinery before, but I'm sure we can get on the list.
Okay. So apart from that, I've created the cap. I think, I tried to assess everything that we kind of said and all of that. And I think I can expand a bit on future extensibility on cell. But I already said there, like, it's complicated. We are going to check that later. Something.
Sure. Yeah, got it.
But yeah, else it's pretty much the same thing. This is one of the change that I made. Like, well, before it was named cluster selector, and it was kind of weird in the Go API. So plus with like a different thing with the cell approach. So I kind of renamed it property selector, but else it's pretty much the same thing. And oh yeah, there's one also addition that I made, which is the concept of cluster fallback policy. So basically choosing if this is open-ended or close-ended. And while thinking about it, I found this use case, like if you want to have one cluster set and have some like legal or whatever constraint that you want the traffic to remain in your zone, for instance, European things, you could do something like that. Like, I don't want to fall back and I just want only those clusters that have these properties to be selected.
I see.
But yeah, apart from that, it's pretty much the same thing.
Cool. Yeah, we can talk about it on the cap. I feel like this specific thing, like such people would want like a separate policy mechanism instead of on the service export directly. But we can talk about it there.
Well, this is a bit what we discussed a bit earlier, like the fact that the consumer should apply that policy or not, or things like that.
I think what Laura means is that this feels somewhat similar to network policies. It might be people will probably want I guess so, right?
It's like admin network policy.
It's like admin network policy, even more so the new replacement for that. I can't remember what it's called now, but that has a cascading mechanism built in.
Oh.
Doesn't work quite like this, but I was thinking more along the lines of for scenarios like this, you'd probably want an overarching policy that says you are not allowed to have any communication between these clusters in these regions, for
Yeah.
example. And that would apply even if people forgot to configure the fallback on a service exports. But at the same time, I can also see scenarios where there are some services where you don't care about that, and you might want to be able to override it. But it still feels like there should be.
I think
You
both
probably
should
want a
work.
combination of mechanisms. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, well, if you drop it via network policies, but you still load balance to that pod that you drop the traffic to, it can cause some weird issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you don't have circuit breaker and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I found some cool use case. I throw like GPU things because, you know,
Sure,
every
yeah.
time it's a GPU these days.
Gotta keep
And,
caps cool
yeah,
these days.
exactly.
Yeah, no, that's the nice thing about having cell in there. You can just add stuff
Yeah.
fairly easily. But at the same time, the complexity becomes what can become a bit crazy. Yeah. But
I
you
mean,
can do everything with labels as well.
the set expression looks okay. Also, one aspect of the list versus Boolean is this is a bit simpler because you don't have to loop. But yeah, it kind of looks okay. But yeah, obviously, if you have like a super simple use case, you might not want to dip your toes into cell, I guess. Yeah. Well, I guess I will just improve a bit the future extensibility of the CAP and mark it as ready, and probably, well, I don't expect that it's merged like tomorrow, but I will probably start discussion with IP machinery and all of that. And find out if I need to count their call directly or check their Slack first. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
All right.
That's great.
Thanks. Yeah. And so we've got 20 minutes pretty much for Priya on user persona and journey mapping for hybrid engineer.
Yeah. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
So this is persona about the engineer who is deploying multi-clusters across cloud, on-premises data centers and edge locations. So this is took from the raw data which we got through the surveys, and the data is interpreted and synthesis, and the output of the synthesis and interpret data that I try to create a persona by using those data. So the demographics would be platform engineer, SRE engineer, software developer, cloud engineer, and DevOps engineer. So, and the primary approach of the engineer is a platform team owns the clusters, gives app teams a namespace, which is a single or multi-cluster, and app teams deploy via Git repositories using allow listed resources. And their secondary approach is a centralized infra team manages the clusters. App teams get a folder in a Git repo and deploy using CRDs provided by the platform team. And the primary use case, different environments for a different stage of software development life cycles and environment separation, production and non-production, and the distribution workloads across clusters and regions to align with the fault domains, improve robustness, ensure high availability, and maintain uninterrupted services during Kubernetes storage or network upgrades. So this primary use case approach and demographics we took from the quantitative data and we analyzed that and we added here similarly the tools as well, the all over the raw data that we interpret the tools that the engineer are using, and we added here like the tools are multi-cluster control and orchestration, custom controllers, rancher, OpenShift advanced cluster management for the cluster lifecycle and infrastructure provisioning, Terraform, cluster API, multi-cluster networking and service connectivity, Istio, Cilium cluster mesh, and GitHubs and application deployment for a multi-cluster setup, Argo CD and Flux CD. Observability across clusters would be Thenos and Grafana. Policy and governance would be Kverno and OPA Gatekeeper.
Just give me just a minute. Could you just take a step back maybe, and because there are people on the call probably who aren't familiar with this. Can you explain the context and what you're trying to do?
So based on the raw data,
Right, no, but the raw data from what? I mean, this is a follow-on from the survey from last
yes,
year.
from the survey from the last year.
That's what I mean in terms of context, right? And this is in preparation for another round of surveys or follow-on surveys?
So this is from the initial survey and interpreted the raw data to bring the pain points and goals, primary use case approach and demographics for the specific engineer who is deploying clusters across cloud, on-premises data centers, and edge locations.
Sorry, Priya, can I add something too?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I think also to Stephen's question, so the utility of the personas is to kind of take out of the information that we have gathered into like concrete pain points and goals that like maybe as a SIG we want to work on, or that we want to connect some of the work that we're doing to. I'm sure that lots of people on the call have like direct experience with some of these problems, or even like customers who like meet this criteria, but this is something that we could generate using like the publicly pulled information, like surveyed data that we got from the perspective of SIG MC, to like make this into a durable artifact that represents what these types of people are like. And then this is also the purpose of the persona is also to be kind of like a living item that like as user research continues, like more surveys occur, or we've been talking about doing some user interviews or like other types of methods to fill in more information from people who have these pain points, then this persona can continue to be updated with that information. And then hopefully, and I hope we can get some insight from folks on the call today or as we're going forward, this is useful. This persona is useful to people to think about like the types of problems that people have, or the type of customers or the type of users that might be interacting with any of the stuff that we've been working on, to kind of make it more concrete beyond maybe what you may have some intuition about or suspicions about. So yeah, I think those are the main like reasons why this project exists, and some more like information about how it can be used going forward.
Thanks.
And the pain points would be for the hybrid engineer: lack of purpose built-in multi-cluster tooling, repetitive manual work, and the day-to-day operational burden of managing multi-clusters, limited skilled engineers, shallow vendor support, and high barrier to entry that leaves team is isolated during complex issues, on-prem versus cloud architecture differences, configuration inconsistencies, identifying the system mismatches, and networking sync challenges across environments. Cross cluster visibility gaps, no unified observability view, and manual triage burden when alert fires. managing and auditing access across clusters and environments, RBAC complexity at scale, identify federation challenges, and secure baseline provisioning. And for this, engineer goals would be enable purpose-built and automation-driven multi-cluster tooling with AI-powered self-service and intuitive developer experience to reduce operational burden and cognitive load, build accessible support systems and simplified workflows that reduce reliance on a limited skill engineers, strengthen vendor support and lower the barrier to managing complex issues, ensure consistent architecture configuration, identity management and seamless network synchronization across on-prem and cloud environments, provided unified cluster visibility and centralized observability to reduce manual triage when alert occurs, simplify and standardize access management across clusters and environments by streamlining RBAC, improving identity federation, and enables secure baseline provisioning at scale. And the next one is these are the challenges specific to the tools, like which are what is the area that engineer are having tool challenges, like setup complexity is 63%, multi-tenancy access control and observability debugging is about 47%, cloud and on-prem integrations is going to be 40%. Poor documentation is about 38%, networking service discovery is 37%. Alert type in multi-cluster setup, pod crashes or restart 71%. Cluster health degradation 58%. API server unresponsiveness is going to be 52%. Inter-cluster network issues is 39%, and inconsistent workload placement is going to be 24%. And the cross cluster automated responses expectations would be automated failover 64%, alert escalation without action 45%, no automation, manual intervention preferred is 10%, auto scaling based on workload health 57%, and policy based workload redistribution 40%. So these are the percentages that we got from the engineers' responses regarding on every options. And yeah, this is the entire persona, and also I have shared the document in SIG meeting notes. So yeah, anyone have any thoughts before we move into journeys? Okay, I'm gonna share a user journey. So this is the journey about a hybrid engineer, how the engineer is deploying multi-clusters and monitoring it, and then debugging the problems and maintaining it in real and production environment. So these hybrid engineers roles and responsibilities are: hybrid engineer who is responsible for deploying, managing and maintaining observability across multiple Kubernetes clusters running in both on-premises and cloud environments. Engineers' roles span the entire multi-cluster lifecycle, from provisioning and workload deployment to monitoring, debugging, upgrades, and scaling operations. Engineer must ensure that every cluster is securely configured, workloads are consistently deployed across environments, and system health is continuously monitored. When incidents occurs, hybrid engineer is expected to quickly identify which cluster is affected, trace dependencies, and restore service without disrupting the other environments. So this approach and primary use case will be same as a persona. So a platform team owns the cluster, gives app teams a namespace, single or multi-cluster, and app teams deploy via Git repositories using allow-listed resources. And the second one is a centralized infra team manages the clusters. App teams get a folder in a Git repo and deploy using CRDs provided by the platform team. And the primary use case will be different environment for different stages of software development life cycle and environment separation, production and non-production. Distribute workloads across clusters and regions to align with fault domains, improve robustness, and ensure high availability, and maintain uninterrupted services during Kubernetes storage or network upgrades. So the journey phase starts with the planning and architecture. So
Hey,
here,
Priya.
yeah.
I think like we won't have time to read the whole journey phase data, but can you talk just generally about like how, like what these stages are and then what the key insights are maybe?
Okay, so this is the journey is about 6 phases like planning and architecture, initial deployment, cross cluster challenges, operational pain, solution discovery, and unified management. So here the each section have a separate scenarios like how the engineer is planning and how the engineer is deploying, and like a cross cluster challenges, operational pain, solution discovery, and unified management. So here in this journey we can see that action points like how the user is engineer is interacting with multi-cluster tools, resources, services, and the whole structure. And then in the touch points we can see that what are the resources or the interface that engineer are interacting while they are using the multi-cluster, and the thoughts will be in each stage different thoughts like first stage we can say that which workload belong to on like a cloud or on-prem, or we can say in the next thoughts we can see why do I need to configure any deployment everything manually. And for the journey each and every phase the engineer has emotions like how sad or difficult, overwhelmed, or frustrated with these challenges. And then we came up with the idea and possible outcomes as well. And this here in each journey phase user has a pain points and the goals. So the pain points would be how the each and every section has every section pain points specifically related to the journey phase like planning and architecture. So engineer mostly what challenges that they are having while they are working with the planning and architecture step, and then the pain points will be initial deployment. So and then for the solution discovery it should be uh, going to be more research oriented solutions and goals like how we can enable or how we can came up with the hybrid engineer problems and how we can solve their problems. And the final stage would be the solution discovery. So in this section we added how the if we establish the unified observability or unified deployment workflows for multi-clusters, how it will be difficult or how it likely be the easy for engineer. Yeah, this is the whole yeah, that's it.
Thanks. So are you is the idea behind this to present hopefully more useful, well, I mean, not that the survey data was not useful already, but even more useful outcomes from the survey data for multi-cluster implementers? Or are you looking for feedback into the various splits in the data?
So basically we have already survey data, but what we are looking is we are looking for a feedback, and we wanted to know like if the engineer is deploying clusters across on-prem or cloud or edge locations, so what is their difficulties and what are their challenges, and if we miss any challenges that really the engineer is facing, so we will add this those information here as well.
Right, but that's going back and asking the people who responded to the survey.
Yes, yeah.
Right, yeah. So I was asking whether there's anything that you're looking for from people in this call, or if this is more to
I
keep
think
everybody informed.
Yeah, for people who are in the call, so maybe it would be helpful for us to give a feedback on each step, like how is these flows and journeys are, like if we may miss anything, that maybe it will be easy for us to understand, and while asking the engineers.
I think if there's something that people in this call would like the user research team to focus on, and it is something that is either like literally a cell in this spreadsheet or a column or a row, or is a comment more generally about the persona or a different persona, I think that's something that we would look for some insight from to affect future research. Priya did migrate this into this Google Slides, or sorry, what is this? This is a spreadsheet.
Sheets.
To migrate this into a spreadsheet to make it a little easier for people to comment on. So I do think that's something we are looking for beyond, but it is also informational for sure. But I think if that is something that can help inform our future research. We don't have too much time, but Ryan, I see you have a hand. So what's up?
I think it's good timing, actually. I was thinking about this, and I think I mentioned last time, it probably will be really helpful if, for me, if I just look at the conclusion, it's kind of hard to get a lot of information. It would be really good if, I know there's some data access, maybe there's some data access restrictions, whatever that is. I think I will work with you and Priya to see if I can help looking at this data and see how this how do we better organize it, or how whether there's any basically to answer your question. I think it's hard to answer the question without understanding exactly how this conclusion is made. That's basically my observation is like looking at this without knowing how we get to this conclusion. It's kind of hard to help answer those questions. But anyway, I'll contact you offline to see if there's anything I can help.
Okay, Priya,
Good presentation.
some methodology slides that maybe we should integrate directly into this like into a tab here so that it's more clear.
Yeah, I think that would be useful too. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, we've run out of time. So thanks, Priya, for the presentation and for all the work that's gone into this. And thanks everybody for attending. I'll see you next time. We've still got a few calls before KubeCon.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.